Bohdan and Marta, a timeless journey. Bohdan and Marta met by chance at a party with mutual friends. He stood quietly in the corner, observing while she laughed with her friends, filling the room with her energy. Their eyes met, and in that instant he felt something new, unexpected. "Hi, I'm Marta," she said with a smile. "Bohdan," he replied, a little shy but curious. Their first conversation was light and carefree. He listened to her stories about travels, dreams, and funny adventures. She felt that before her stood someone who needed no pretense. Slowly and gently, a bond began to form, through attention and sincerity. With time, their meetings grew longer. Walks through the city, conversations under the night sky, dreams about the future. Yet it wasn't always easy. Bohdan was afraid to open his feelings, while Marta longed for warmth in words. One evening she said, "Sometimes it feels like you're far away, even when we're together." "I'm afraid of losing you, so I stay silent," he confessed, showing his fear for the first time. This became a turning point. They learned to be honest with each other, and their relationship blossomed in new colors. Months passed. Bohdan brought her coffee in the mornings, left notes, called just to say he missed her. Their love no longer needed grand words. It revealed itself in small gestures, attention, and care. But a challenge awaited. Bohdan received a job offer in another city. The separation was hard. Evenings were spent on video calls, exchanging messages, counting days until they could meet again. And it was then they realized that true love is patience, the ability to wait and trust. When Bohdan returned, they met at the train station. They hugged silently and he whispered, "Now I know. My home is wherever you are." Later, Bohdan proposed to Marta. They moved into a small apartment together. The creaky doors, old tiles, and tiny balcony didn't matter. They cooked dinner, laughed, shared thoughts and plans. A daughter, Sofika, was born. She transformed their lives. Lullabies, first steps, first words. Bohdan, who once feared showing feelings, now spent hours by her crib whispering, "Daddy's here. I'll always be with you." Eventually, they moved to a house in the countryside. They planted flowers, had picnics on the grass, and laughed at life's little things. They learned to value not perfect moments, but sincere, small joys. Over 30 years passed. Sofika grew up, started her own family. Bohdan still brought Marta coffee in the morning. She still dreamed and shared memories. They sat on the porch at sunset, realizing true happiness is walking side by side through all difficulties and years. When Bohdan and Marta were gone, their house and garden remained the living heart of the family. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren ran among the trees, listening to stories about love, patience, and respect. Photographs of Bohdan and Marta became symbols of true love. "Grandma and Grandpa were always together, right?" a great-granddaughter asked. "Yes, dear. They taught us to love and stay together, even when it's hard," Sofika replied. Decades passed. Young descendants listened to stories about Bohdan and Marta, sometimes skeptically, sometimes with curiosity. They learned that true love is a daily choice, patience, care, and small actions that make life full. The old trees planted by Bohdan and Marta still grew, protecting new generations. Children ran among the branches while adults listened, feeling an invisible thread of love connecting past and future. Even after centuries, the story of Bohdan and Marta lived on. Their simple, everyday love became a legend, teaching all descendants that true love is devotion, care, and the willingness to stay together under any circumstances. Because true love never ends. It passes from generation to generation, lives in memories and hearts, and in the small gestures that make life complete. Centuries passed. The world transformed, towering cities, flying vehicles, instant communication across continents. Yet the garden and house survived, preserved by generations who understood their meaning. Bohdan and Marta's love had become almost mythical, a guiding principle for the family. Children of the far future ran through the garden, laughing, inspired by stories of patience, small gestures, and devotion. Young couples whispered promises, vowing to honor the legacy of Bohdan and Marta in their own lives. Even centuries later, the garden, the house, and the stories endured. Bohdan and Marta's love, simple and profound, had transformed into legend, an eternal flame guiding hearts forever. Their story had become immortal, a timeless symbol that true love is presence, patience, care, and unwavering devotion shaping families across generations. Thousands of years later, the world had become unrecognizable. Humanity spread across stars, explored distant planets, and lived in unimaginable civilizations. Yet the garden and house still stood. No longer just a home, it was a sacred monument, a living symbol of love transcending time. Descendants, countless generations removed, still visited the garden. For them, Bohdan and Marta were mythic figures, guiding lights. Children ran along the ancient paths, elders retold stories of patience, devotion, and the small gestures that build a lifetime of love. Did they really stay together forever? Asked a child, gazing at a holographic portrait. Yes, answered a great-great-great-grandparent. They taught us that true love is a choice every day, a commitment to care, to be present, and to stay together through all trials. That choice flows through all of us, across time and space. Young couples walked the garden paths, whispering vows inspired by Bohdan and Marta's invisible thread of love. As civilizations rose and fell, their story endured, a force guiding hearts, shaping lives, and teaching that love, nurtured and chosen daily, never fades. The house, the garden, and the ancient trees stood as eternal witnesses. Bohdan and Marta's love had become immortal, a beacon of devotion, patience, and unwavering care. Across galaxies and millennia, their legacy endured. Love, once simple and human, had transformed into an infinite, timeless force, a guiding light for all hearts, everywhere, for all eternity. Even as stars faded and new worlds were born, Bohdan and Marta's love remained. It became a cosmic legend whispered across the universe. That love, chosen and nurtured every day, never fades. 1,000,000 years after Bohdan and Marta had walked the earth, their garden had become more than a monument. Around it, a city of light rose, a meeting place for travelers from distant worlds. They came not for trade or conquest, but to stand beneath the ancient trees and feel the quiet warmth of a story that had survived longer than most civilizations. Historians called it the House of Choice. Pilgrims called it the Heart of Love. Holographic archives retold Bohdan and Marta's everyday gestures. The coffee in the morning, the whispered lullabies, the patient waiting at a train station. What had once been simple human life had become a universal teaching. That greatness begins with kindness, and eternity begins with a single sincere choice. Starfarers returned to their ships carrying seeds from the garden, planting them on new worlds. Entire colonies grew small groves of Bohdan trees, as living reminders of care and devotion. Young people on distant planets walked among them, whispering their own promises, just as young couples once had in the original garden. Some said that, in moments of stillness, you could almost sense Bohdan and Marta's presence. Not as ghosts, but as a quiet courage that lives inside every heart, willing to choose love over fear. Their story was no longer just a legend. It had become a compass, guiding countless beings through the coldness of space toward warmth, patience, and daily acts of kindness. On the ocean world of Oriole 3, storms covered most of the planet, but in one quiet bay, a group of settlers planted the first Bohdan trees. Within years, a living grove rose out of the alien ground, its branches bending toward one another as if in an embrace. Families came there for arrival ceremonies. Children pressed their palms against the trunks and felt a faint warmth. Under the largest tree stood a stone with words etched in dozens of languages. True love is a choice made every day. Centuries later, the Oriole 3 Grove became the heart of a vast floating city. When storms raged outside, its citizens gathered under the Bohdan trees for calm. The legend of two ordinary humans who chose one another gave courage to people who lived among stars and storms. The Garden of Earth had become many gardens, each a living thread in a tapestry of care stretching across the galaxy. Explorers began to chart a route across dozens of star systems. Wherever the descendants of Earth settled, they planted a circle of trees and built a quiet place of care. On the maps, the gardens formed a single shape across the spiral arm of the galaxy, two figures holding hands beneath a tree. Pilots began to call it the Constellation of Hearts. In flight logs, alongside coordinates and fuel levels, they wrote small notes like, "Crossed the Marta Grove, thought of home. Docked near Bohdan Station, left a flower from my mother's garden." Beyond the edge of the Milky Way, civilizations that had never seen Earth pieced together fragments of an old tale about two humans who chose each other every day. They planted their own versions of Bohdan trees, some of wood and leaves, some of living light. Pilgrims from dozens of worlds walked among these glowing groves, whispering vows in their own tongues. Travelers said that in the silent void between galaxies you could sometimes feel a warmth, like a heartbeat beneath the stars. They called it the echo of two souls. It was no longer a myth of one family or even one species. It had become a common language of care, proof that even the smallest daily choices can ripple forever outward. Eris passed beyond counting. Stars dimmed and galaxies stretched thin. Civilizations built on light and song had risen and faded. Yet in the coldest corners of space, the gardens still shone, some as living trees, some as crystalline structures, some as patterns of energy humming quietly in the dark. No one alive then had met Bohdan or Marta. But the gestures lived on. They had become codes in the architecture of habitats, melodies in interstellar navigation, patterns of movement in dances performed under alien skies. At the center of the oldest garden, on a world orbiting a cooling star, there stood one last living tree. Pilgrims who made the long journey there would stand beneath it and feel a pulse, a soft vibration, like a heartbeat. They didn't hear words, but they felt an idea. Choose care, choose presence, choose each other. And so, even at the edge of time, Bohdan and Marta's story was not a book with a last page, but a living current running through hearts and hands. In every new beginning, in every meeting between two beings who paused long enough to look at one another, the story started again. A child was born on a small green world at the far edge of a fading galaxy. She had never heard of Earth or its old cities. Yet, from her earliest days, she felt drawn to plant seeds, to leave small gifts for others, to listen quietly before she spoke. Her family lived beside a grove of tall, pale-leaf trees, whose origins they could not explain. On one of the trunks, in a script no one could read anymore, was a simple carving, two figures holding hands beneath a tree. As she grew, the child began to collect the fragments of an ancient story told in many voices. Some called it the Tale of the Two. Others called it the First Garden. She only knew it felt like home. One evening, sitting under the largest tree, she whispered, "If this story began with two people, maybe it begins again with me." Each time someone chose pace instead of haste, care instead of indifference, the thread of Bohdan and Marta wove a new stitch into the fabric of time. What had started as one couple's life had become a living pattern, a way of being that kept appearing wherever there were hearts capable of choosing it. And so, even as the old stars cooled and new ones were born, the story did not end. It became a rhythm, a heartbeat echoing quietly in every garden, every promise, every gentle act. Love begins in a moment. It continues as a choice. It lives wherever it is chosen again.